Today I'm going to talk about someone who saved a company that means a lot to me, the Walt Disney Company. Since Walt Disney's death in 1966, the Walt Disney Company was struggling. For 18 years, the company was left directionless and stagnant after finishing the few projects that Walt was working on before his death. This period of forgettable films and a lack of success led to massive stopcocks, resulting in a hostile takeover attempt in 1984. To stop this from happening, Roy E. Disney, Walt's nephew, led a group of investors to buy large amounts of stock back in an attempt to save Disney, and appointed Michael Eisner as the new company's CEO. Eisner then proceeded to reinvigorate and ultimately save the company by overseeing the creation of well-received new projects in every area of the company. I'm going to start with the area of Disney that I care about the most, the theme parks. At the time of Eisner taking over, the theme park creative department, known as Imagineering, was so underused that the executive driving Eisner to it on a visit when he first took over didn't know how to get to the building. Many of the Imagineers feared he was coming to disband the division. Instead, Eisner called it the crown jewel of the Walt Disney Company. When Eisner took over, one of the first things he did was take his then teenage son Breck to Disneyland to get a feel for how teenagers of America viewed the park. He was surprised when Breck expressed his view that most of Disney's attractions were lame and boring. Because of this, Eisner led the creation of several more thrilling attractions to draw in an older market, such as the then intense Splash Mountain. This included working with other companies for rides based on popular films for the first time, such as Star Tours and Indiana Jones Adventure in California, as well as a sadly forgotten about 3D collaboration with Michael Jackson. During his time at Disney, Michael Eisner greatly expanded the number of existing Disney parks, going from just 4 when he took over in 1984 to 11 when he stepped down in 2005. Eisner oversaw the creation of resorts in Paris and Hong Kong, as well as the expanding of the existing resorts in California, Tokyo, and of course, Florida. This period of expansion included the creation of 2 of the Florida parks. First was MGM Studios, now known as Hollywood Studios, which is a key example of the cooperation with other companies Eisner formed, using many outside properties MGM used to own. After that came the ambitious Animal Kingdom, seen here under construction, which is still to this day Disney's largest park. While I have felt the most impacts of Eisner's time through the theme parks, the section of Disney that really needed saving in the 80s was the animation division. In the early 80s, Disney's animation department was almost dissolved thanks to huge losses with flops like The Black Cauldron and The Great Mouse Detective. But as soon as Eisner took over, things began to shift. With newly appointed head of studio Jeffrey Katzenberg, Eisner approved the creation of The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid's Broadway-style story turned into a smash hit for Disney and kickstarted what's known as the Disney Animation Renaissance, which included many vastly popular and profitable films such as Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. This, along with the aforementioned theme park expansion and the launch of the Disney Channel, were a big part of the 90s being referred to by Michael Eisner as the Disney Decade. Well, this period of success for animation eventually faded with flops like Treasure Planet and Chicken Little in the early 2000s. Eisner already had a solution. Disney had entered into an agreement with the then new company Pixar to distribute, profit off of, and own the rights to Pixar's films. Meaning that while Disney's main studio was weakening, they still had the successes of Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., and The Incredibles. During this time, there was also much advancement in Disney's live-action films. Disney began using the Touchstone Pictures name to release more adult-focused films, such as Armageddon, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In addition to this, Eisner purchased Miramax in 1994 and allowed Miramax to operate with unprecedented freedom. This freedom let Miramax released films such as Scream and Pulp Fiction, which were decidedly less family-friendly than what Disney would normally put out. Meanwhile, in television, Disney and Eisner completed what was at the time Disney's largest acquisition, the purchase of ABC. This gave Disney several television channels and new ways to make profit, most notably with ESPN, making Disney the new largest broadcaster of sports in the world. However, despite all of this success, Eisner was not well loved by the end of the 90s. The debut of Disneyland Paris, while eventually successful, was at the time hated by the people of France, who considered it a capitalist attack on their traditional French values. Sadly, Disney's president, Frank Wells, died in a helicopter accident. When this happened, studio head Jeffrey Katzenberg assumed and demanded that he would get the position of president. Eisner instead denied him and took on both roles himself. Following this, Jeffrey Katzenberg developed a bit of a grudge and left to form DreamWorks, which to this day is Disney's largest competitor in animation. But perhaps Michael Eisner's biggest failure was Disney's America. Disney's America was to be a history-based theme park intended to be located in Haymarket, Virginia, less than an hour from where I'm currently living in Fredericksburg. The concept faced enormous backlash from historians, both for its concept and its location dangerously close to historic Civil War battlefields. All of this, combined with several large box office flops in the early 2000s, led to the man who got him the job, Roy E. Disney, leading a campaign of shareholders against Eisner, which he again called a campaign to save Disney. Eventually, Eisner stepped down from his contract and resigned a year before it ran out in 2005, before being succeeded by Bob Iger, until he himself eventually stepped down just a few months ago. In summary, while not perfect, Michael Eisner's time leading Disney gave us many of the company's most iconic attractions and films.